The bitter winter wind sliced through Ellie Sullivan's thin waitress uniform as she hurried down the deserted streets of Boston. Snowflakes danced in the amber glow of streetlights, settling on her blonde hair and eyelashes. Her fingers red and raw from washing dishes for 10 hours straight at Little Sicily clutched her meager tips, $28.35. Not even enough for tomorrow's groceries, let alone the overdue rent that her landlord had been hounding her about all week. Ellie pulled her second-hand coat tighter around her slender frame, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid night air. The temperature had dropped another 10 degrees since sunset, and weather reports warned of the worst winter storm in decades approaching the city. Normal people were home by now, huddled around heaters with hot chocolate and Netflix. But normal people didn't work double shifts at Italian restaurants to make ends meet. Her usual route home took her through an alley behind Franklin Avenue, a shortcut she'd walked hundreds of times before. Tonight felt different somehow. The silence more oppressive, the darkness deeper than usual. The distant wail of sirens carried on the wind, a reminder of the city's constant dangers. Ellie nearly tripped over him, a crumpled form half hidden between a luxury car and the brick wall of an abandoned storefront. At first glance, she thought it was just another pile of discarded clothes, or perhaps one of the neighborhood's homeless, seeking shelter from the biting cold, until she noticed the expensive leather shoes, the slight rise and fall of breathing. "Hello," Ellie called, approaching cautiously. "Are you okay?" No response. Dropping to her knees, ignoring the snow soaking through her uniform pants, Ellie gently turned the figure over. A boy. He couldn't have been more than 14, with dark hair and olive skin, dressed in clothes worth more than her entire wardrobe. A private school uniform beneath a cashmere coat that seemed wildly out of place in this neighborhood. His complexion was deathly pale, lips tinged with blue. No visible wounds or blood, but his skin felt cold and clammy to the touch. Ellie pressed her fingers against his neck, finding his pulse weak but steady. "Hey, can you hear me?" she whispered, her waitress persona giving way to something else entirely. Her movements became precise, clinical. She checked his breathing, examined his pupils, looked for medical alert jewelry. This wasn't Ellie the waitress anymore. This was Ellie, who had completed 3 years of medical school before her parents' car accident changed everything. Ellie, who still subscribed to medical journals she could barely afford, who read textbooks at night after her shifts, who couldn't let go of the dream even when financial reality had forced her to abandon it. Something about the boy's symptoms triggered her memory. Cold, clammy skin, rapid, shallow breathing, no alcohol on his breath. She lifted one eyelid, then the other. Hypoglycemia, she murmured to herself. Severe low blood sugar. Potentially life-threatening. Ellie rummaged through his pockets, searching for identification or medication. Her fingers closed around a sleek smartphone with a case that probably cost more than her weekly paycheck. The screen lit up at her touch, displaying only one emergency contact. Dad. No name, just that single word. Her finger hovered over the button for just a moment before she pressed it, heart pounding as the call connected almost instantly. "Thomas," came the response, a deep voice with the barest hint of an Italian accent. A voice that somehow managed to sound both concerned and threatening in that single word. "This isn't Thomas," Ellie replied, her voice shakier than she'd intended. "My name is Ellie Sullivan. I found a boy collapsed on Franklin Avenue near 23rd Street. I think this is his father's phone number." The silence that followed was so absolute that Ellie thought the call had dropped. Then she heard the faint sound of rapid breathing on the other end. "Is he breathing?" the man finally asked, his voice now hard as steel. All pretense of calm completely vanished. "Yes, but he's unconscious. I think it might be hypoglycemia. His skin is cold and clammy. Pulse is weak, but steady breathing, shallow. No visible injuries." Ellie explained, automatically falling into the clinical tone she'd practiced in her hospital rotations years ago. "How do you know about hypoglycemia?" The question came sharp, suspicious. "I was a medical student," Ellie answered, no time to explain the past tense. "He needs sugar immediately. Does he have diabetes? Stay exactly where you are. Do not move him. Do not call anyone else." The man's voice had transformed into something that made Ellie's blood run cold. "I'm 8 minutes away." The call ended abruptly. Ellie looked down at the boy, then around at the deserted street. Every instinct told her to call 911. The boy needed immediate medical attention. But something in that voice had conveyed absolute authority. and danger. 7 minutes later, Ellie heard the purr of an expensive engine as a black Bentley with tinted windows glided to a stop at the curb. She tensed, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she was, alone in an alley with an unconscious child and no witnesses. 3 men emerged in perfect synchronization, 2 taking positions on either side of the vehicle, while the third approached with purposeful strides. Even from a distance, Ellie could feel the authority radiating from him. Tall and imposing in a tailored overcoat that couldn't quite conceal the bulge of what she instinctively knew was a shoulder holster. He appeared to be in his mid-40s with salt and pepper hair and piercing eyes that scanned the street before settling on her with laser-like intensity. Mr. Salvatore, the man introduced himself tersely as he knelt beside his son, his movements betraying none of the panic a normal parent would display. "You said hypoglycemia." Ellie nodded, watching as he produced a small kit from his coat pocket with practiced efficiency. "Type 1 diabetes." Since he was 8, he confirmed, administering a glucose injection with the confidence of someone who had done this countless times before. His hands, Ellie noticed, bore the juxtaposition of expensive manicured nails and old scars across the knuckles. Hands that had seen both luxury and violence. Within moments, color began returning to the boy's face, his eyelids fluttering open to reveal eyes identical to his father's. "Dad," he mumbled, clearly disoriented, "I forgot my emergency kit at school after basketball practice. I thought I could make it home." Mr. Salvatore's expression softened almost imperceptibly as he helped his son to sit up. "We'll discuss your poor decision-making later," he said, though the relief in his voice undermined the attempted sternness. One of the men from the point approached, whispered something in Mr. Salvatore's ear. The older man nodded once, his eyes flicking back to Ellie, assessing her with new interest. As they helped Thomas to his feet, Ellie awkwardly began to step away, considering her good deed done. "Wait," Mr. Salvatore commanded without looking at her, the single word freezing her in place more effectively than a physical barrier. "Thank you for helping my son," he said, finally turning to face her fully, his penetrating gaze seeming to catalog every detail of her appearance. The worn uniform beneath her threadbare coat, the exhaustion etched into her features, the determination in her eyes despite it all. "Anyone would have done the same," Ellie replied, though they both knew that wasn't true. "Not in this neighborhood, not at this hour, not for a stranger who screamed wealth and vulnerability in equal measure." Mr. Salvatore reached into his pocket, and Ellie instinctively stepped back, her pride bristling at the thought of being offered money. "I don't need a reward," she said quickly, chin lifting with the stubborn dignity that had carried her through years of poverty. "Not a reward," he corrected, extending a business card made of heavy stock paper with nothing but a phone number embossed in silver. "An opportunity. Call this number tomorrow morning. I have a proposition for someone with your medical knowledge and moral character." As the Bentley disappeared into the night with Thomas safely inside, Ellie stood alone on the street corner, the expensive business card feeling impossibly heavy in her hand. Something told her that accepting his opportunity would irrevocably change the course of her life. She just couldn't decide if that change would be salvation or destruction. The card remained on Ellie's nightstand all night, catching the moonlight through her apartment's thin curtains. Sleep eluded her as she stared at the ceiling of her tiny apartment, listening to the radiator's futile attempts to combat the winter chill. The pipes in the walls knocked rhythmically, a familiar lullaby of poverty that tonight failed to lull her to sleep. Who was Marcus Salvatore? The expensive car, the bodyguards, the barely concealed weapon? Her mind cycled through possibilities, none of them comforting. Drug lord, corrupt businessman, politician, the secrets. Boston had its share of all three. By morning, curiosity and desperation won out over caution. Ellie dialed the number with trembling fingers, surprised when a crisp female voice answered immediately and instructed her to arrive at an address in Beacon Hill, Boston's most affluent neighborhood, in precisely 2 hours. 2 hours later, Ellie stood before wrought iron gates that protected a limestone mansion from the rest of the world. Her reflection in the polished metal looked painfully out of place. She wore her best outfit, which wasn't saying much. Black pants with only one nearly invisible mend at the knee. A blue blouse she'd found at a thrift store that still had its original buttons. The coat that had belonged to her mother. "Miss Sullivan," the security guard greeted her by name, as if he'd been expecting her. "Mr. Salvatore is waiting." The gates parted silently, allowing her access to a circular driveway where perfectly manicured hedges dusted with snow framed the mansion's imposing facade, a mansion that made Ellie's apartment building look like a dollhouse in comparison. A housekeeper met her at the door, a small woman with watchful eyes, who led Ellie through marble hallways adorned with artwork that belonged in museums. The wealth on display was staggering, not gaudy, but substantial, speaking of generations rather than new money. Mr. Salvatore waited in what she assumed was his study, a room larger than her entire apartment, lined with leather-bound books and dominated by an antique desk. He rose when she entered, a gesture of old-world courtesy that seemed at odds with the dangerous aura he projected. "Miss Sullivan, please sit." He gestured to a leather chair across from his desk. "Coffee, tea?" "No, thank you," Ellie said, perching on the edge of the chair, back straight, hands folded in her lap, the posture of someone determined not to show intimidation. Marcus Salvatore studied her with those penetrating eyes. Today in the daylight, she could see they were a deep brown, almost black. His face bore the marks of a life fully lived, lines at the corners of his eyes and mouth that spoke of both laughter and hardship. "You were a medical student," he stated. Not a question. "What happened?" The direct question caught her off guard. "My parents died in a car accident during my 3rd year. There was no insurance. Medical school isn't cheap. And now you're a waitress." "Yes. But you still remembered how to recognize hypoglycemia, still knew exactly what to do." Ellie shifted in her seat. "Some things you don't forget." A small smile touched his lips, there and gone in an instant. "Indeed." He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled before him. "My son Thomas has type 1 diabetes. His condition requires constant monitoring, especially now during adolescence, when hormonal changes make blood sugar levels unpredictable." His mother, a shadow passed over his face. "Caroline would have managed it perfectly. She was a nurse, but she passed away 5 years ago. Cancer." "I'm sorry for your loss," Ellie said automatically, though she wondered why this powerful man was sharing personal details with her. "Since then, we've gone through 7 private nurses. None lasted more than a few months. Thomas is challenging. Being a teenager is hard enough without medical complications and security concerns." "Security concerns?" Marcus waved a hand dismissively. "I have business interests that occasionally attract unwanted attention." The euphemism hung in the air between them. "Business interests, the kind that required armed bodyguards and made you check the alley before picking up your son. Miss Sullivan, I'd like to offer you a position as Thomas's personal caregiver. You'd live here, monitor his condition, accompany him to school events when necessary, ensure his medical needs are met. In return, I'm prepared to offer compensation 5 times your current salary, plus room and board health insurance and other benefits." Ellie blinked, certain she had misheard. 5 times? Your current salary at Little Sicily is $8.25 an hour, plus tips averaging approximately $22,000 annually. I'm offering $110,000 plus bonuses based on Thomas's health metrics remaining stable. Is that acceptable? Her mind reeled. That kind of money would change everything. Pay off her parents' remaining medical debts. Maybe even allow her to finish her degree someday. "Why me?" she asked, finding her voice. "I'm not a licensed nurse. There are thousands of qualified healthcare professionals in Boston. Last night you found my son unconscious in an alley. You could have robbed him, called the police, done nothing. Instead, you correctly diagnosed his condition, called me directly, and stayed with him until help arrived. That speaks to character, Miss Sullivan. Something money can't buy." His eyes never left hers. "Not to mention, Thomas mentioned you were kind to him. That's rare." Ellie looked down at her hands, suddenly conscious of her chipped nail polish. Something about this felt too good to be true, and in her experience, things that seemed too good to be true usually were. "What exactly is your business, Mr. Salvatore?" His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Respect, perhaps, that she had the courage to ask directly. "Imports primarily. Shipping, real estate, some construction. All legitimate enterprises now, though my family's history in Boston has not always been conventional." The implication was clear enough. Organized crime going legitimate. A familiar Boston story, particularly among Italian-American families. The city's history was written in such transitions. And the security concerns, "Old rivalries die hard, Miss Sullivan. There are those who resent success, especially when it comes through channels they don't control. He leaned forward slightly. I won't lie to you. Working for me comes with certain risks, but I can promise you'll be protected. My security team is the best money can buy. Ellie took a deep breath. May I see Thomas again before I decide? Something like approval flickered in Marcus's eyes. Of course. Thomas Salvatore's bedroom suite occupied the entire east wing of the mansion's second floor. The space was a teenage boy's dream, complete with gaming systems, a massive television, and sports memorabilia. But Ellie's trained eye immediately noticed the medical equipment partially hidden behind decorative screens. The continuous glucose monitor, the emergency supplies, the mini fridge stocked with juice and glucose tablets. Thomas himself sat at a desk, textbooks spread before him, a tutor at his side. He looked up when they entered, recognition dawning on his face. You're the lady from last night, he said, dismissing the tutor with a casual wave that spoke of a lifetime of privilege. Ellie Sullivan, she introduced herself. How are you feeling today? Fine, he shrugged, but his eyes, so like his father's, watched her warily. Dad says you're going to be my new babysitter. Healthcare manager, Marcus corrected from the doorway, and Miss Sullivan hasn't accepted the position yet. Thomas studied her for a long moment. You knew I had diabetes just by looking at me. That was cool. Ellie smiled. Medical training. And you had all the classic symptoms. The other nurses were always checking their phones and telling me what to do. They acted like I was stupid. His eyes challenged her. Are you going to do that too? No, Ellie answered honestly. I'm going to teach you to manage your own condition. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to your own body. Thomas looked surprised, then thoughtful. He glanced at his father, then back at Ellie. Okay, you can stay. Marcus cleared his throat. Thomas, Miss Sullivan, and I have more to discuss. Continue with your studies. Back in the study, Ellie made her decision. I'll accept the position with one condition. Marcus raised an eyebrow, clearly not accustomed to conditions. I want to keep my weekend shifts at Little Sicily. That's unnecessary. Your salary here will more than compensate. It's not about money, Ellie explained. It's about independence. Having something that's mine. Something normal. Marcus studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he nodded. Very well. Weekends at the restaurant if you insist, though I'll expect you to prioritize Thomas if his condition requires it. Of course. Then we have an agreement. He extended his hand and Ellie shook it, feeling the strength in his grip, the calluses that belied his expensive suit. Welcome to the Salvatore household, Miss Sullivan. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind as Ellie settled into her new role. Her room turned out to be a spacious suite adjacent to Thomas's, decorated in soft blues and creams, with a private bathroom bigger than her old apartment's kitchen. The closet gradually filled with clothes that appeared mysteriously tags removed, but clearly expensive. Each time she tried to refuse, Marcus simply said, consider it uniform. Appearance matters in this household. Establishing a rapport with Thomas proved challenging, but not impossible. The boy was intelligent, sarcastic, and deeply mistrustful of authority figures. But Ellie's approach of treating him as a partner in his own care rather than a patient to be managed gradually wore down his defenses. Why'd you quit medical school? He asked one afternoon as she demonstrated how to properly calculate insulin dosages. You're good at this stuff. I didn't quit. Life happened, Ellie corrected, adjusting the formula. My parents died my 3rd year. Dad was a doctor, Mom was a high school teacher. Neither had much life insurance. The medical bills wiped out their savings, and I couldn't afford tuition anymore. Thomas absorbed this. That sucks. It does, but everyone has their challenges. Yours is diabetes. Mine was financial hardship. We play the cards we're dealt. Dad could pay for you to go back to school. Ellie smiled. Probably, but I prefer to make my own way when possible. That's stupid, Thomas said bluntly. If someone offers help, you should take it. Sometimes pride is all you have left, Ellie replied. Besides, I'm not sure your father hired me for my sparkling personality. I think he values the fact that I'm not easily bought. Something in her words resonated with Thomas. After that conversation, he became more cooperative, even enthusiastic about learning to manage his condition. His blood sugar readings stabilized. The dark circles under his eyes faded. He began talking about joining the basketball team again. Marcus noticed the changes. Ellie often felt his eyes following her as she moved through the house, assessing, evaluating. They rarely spoke beyond brief updates about Thomas, yet she sensed his constant awareness of her presence. It was unsettling and strangely thrilling. One evening, nearly 3 weeks after she'd started, Ellie was returning from checking on Thomas when she heard voices from Marcus's study. The door stood slightly ajar, and though she knew she should walk past, something made her pause. "Castellano is making moves again," a man's voice said. "Not Marcus. Victor has always lacked patience," Marcus replied, his tone dismissive. "What specifically?" His people were asking questions about Thomas, school schedule, medical condition, the kind of questions people don't ask unless they're planning something. A long silence followed. When Marcus spoke again, his voice had changed, grown colder, harder. The voice from the phone call that first night. "Increase security at the school, discreetly, and find out who's talking. Someone is providing information they shouldn't have." And the new nurse, Sullivan. Another pause. "She stays. Thomas needs her. She's a vulnerability, boss, an unknown factor. She's been vetted thoroughly. Harvard Medical School, partial scholarship, dropped out after parents died in a car crash on Route 2. No criminal record, no suspicious connections. Clean." Ellie's cheeks burned. They'd investigated her. "Still," the other man persisted, "if Castellano is targeting Thomas, anyone close to him becomes a potential target or leverage point." "I'm aware," Marcus said, his tone ending the discussion. "That's why you're going to assign Johnston to shadow Miss Sullivan when she leaves the property, particularly during her shifts at that restaurant." "Yes, boss." Ellie backed away silently, heart pounding. Castellano, targeting Thomas. Security. Boss. Each word confirmed what she'd suspected, but tried to ignore. Marcus Salvatore wasn't just any businessman with unconventional family history. He was connected, powerful in ways that went beyond legitimate business. And someone named Victor Castellano was apparently targeting his son. That weekend, Ellie insisted on keeping her shift at Little Sicily, despite Marcus's subtle suggestions that she reconsider. The familiar rhythm of taking orders and delivering plates grounded her, reminded her of who she was before the Salvatore mansion, before five-figure salaries and unspoken dangers. She was wiping down tables after the dinner rush when she noticed him. A man sitting alone in the corner booth nursing a glass of wine he barely touched. He'd been there for at least an hour. Watching. Johnston, she presumed, her assigned shadow. The knowledge should have bothered her more than it did. Instead, she felt an odd sense of reassurance, especially when she caught sight of another man across the street as she left the restaurant. In a city known for its dangerous neighborhoods, Ellie Sullivan now walked with an invisible shield of protection. The illusion of safety shattered 3 days later. Ellie had just finished helping Thomas with his physics homework when Marcus appeared in the doorway, his face grim. "Thomas, go to your room. Lockdown protocol." The boy's eyes widened, but he didn't argue, immediately gathering his books. Years of drills had prepared him for this moment. "What's happening?" Ellie asked once Thomas had left. "Victor Castellano has been making inquiries. Not just about Thomas now, about you." Marcus's voice was controlled, but Ellie could see the tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. "Me? Why would anyone care about me?" "Because you're part of this household now, because you matter to Thomas." A pause. "Because you matter to me." The words hung in the air between them, unexpected and weighted with meaning. Neither was ready to acknowledge him. "You should have told me about Castellano before," Ellie said quietly. "About the danger to Thomas." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "You've been eavesdropping." "I overheard. There's a difference." She met his gaze steadily. "If I'm going to protect Thomas properly, I need to understand the threats he faces." For a moment, she thought he might be angry. Instead, something like respect flickered in his eyes. "Victor Castellano is an old associate who believes I've betrayed our heritage by moving into legitimate business. He considers it weakness, particularly my efforts to distance my son from certain aspects of the family business." "By family business, you mean organized crime," Ellie said bluntly. Marcus didn't flinch. "My father was what you might call a traditional capo in South Boston. I inherited certain responsibilities. For years, I worked to transition our interests toward legitimate enterprises. Banking, real estate, import-export. Victor opposed these changes. When I refused to involve Thomas in the traditional side of things, he saw it as the final betrayal. And now he's targeting Thomas as what punishment? Leverage. He believes if Thomas is threatened, I'll return to the old ways to protect him. Consolidate power. Partner with victors against mutual enemies. Marcus's jaw tightened. He's wrong. So what happens now? Ellie asked. Now we increase security. You and Thomas remain on the property unless absolutely necessary. Your shifts at Little Sicily are suspended indefinitely. I'm not a prisoner, Mr. Salvatore. No, you're a target, he corrected, and I protect what's mine. The possessive statement should have offended her. Instead, it sent an unexpected thrill down her spine. I have commitments outside this house, people who depend on me. Her thoughts turned to Rose, her elderly neighbor, who relied on Ellie's weekly visits for groceries and companionship. Your financial obligations can be handled. Name them and they'll be taken care of. It's not about money, it's about people. Ellie stepped closer, frustration overriding caution. You can't just lock us away in this fortress indefinitely. That's not living. Marcus studied her, something shifting in his expression. You really aren't afraid of me, are you? Should I be? Most people are. I'm not most people. The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither was prepared to name. Then the sound of footsteps broke the tension as one of Marcus's security team approached, whispering urgently in his ear. His expression darkened. Miss Sullivan, please join Thomas in his quarters. Security will escort you. His tone left no room for argument. 3 hours later, Ellie sat beside Thomas's bed, watching him sleep. The boy had been frightened despite his attempts to hide it, asking questions Ellie couldn't answer. Eventually, exhaustion had claimed him, but not before extracting a promise that she wouldn't leave. A soft knock at the door announced Marcus's arrival. He entered silently, his gaze falling first on his sleeping son, then moving to Ellie. In the dim light, his face looked carved from stone, all sharp angles and shadows. He's finally asleep, Ellie whispered. Marcus nodded, approaching the bed to brush a strand of hair from Thomas's forehead with unexpected tenderness. He worries, like his mother. Children absorb more than we realize. Yes. Marcus straightened, gesturing for Ellie to follow him into the adjoining sitting room. Once there, he closed the door partially, leaving it open enough to hear if Thomas woke. There's been a development, he said, his voice low. Castellano made his first move. Not against Thomas directly, but as a warning. What kind of warning? The restaurant where you work, Little Sicily. There was a fire tonight. Ellie gasped. Was anyone hurt? No, it started after closing. The damage is significant, but no casualties. This is because of me, because I work there. Because I hired you, Marcus corrected. Victor is sending a message, testing boundaries. Guilt and fear twisted in Ellie's stomach. People's livelihoods destroyed because of her connection to the Salvatores. The owners will be compensated, Marcus said, reading her expression. Generously. The restaurant will reopen better than before. That doesn't make it right. No, it doesn't. His eyes hardened. Victor crossed a line. Something in his tone made Ellie shiver. What will you do? What's necessary to protect my family? His gaze met hers, intense and unwavering. Which now includes you, Ellie. The use of her first name, so unexpected, so intimate, caught her off guard. I have a choice, she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Marcus stepped closer, near enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle. We always have choices. Stay knowing the risks, or leave with enough money to restart your life somewhere far from Boston. Complete your medical degree. Begin again. And Thomas? Would miss you terribly, but he would understand. Would he, Ellie challenged, or would he see it as one more person abandoning him when things got difficult? Marcus's expression softened almost imperceptibly. You care about him? Of course I do. He's a good kid who's been through too much already. And me? The question was so quiet she almost missed it. Do you care what happens to me, Ellie Sullivan? Before she could answer, alarms blared throughout the house, a harsh electronic wail that shattered the moment. Marcus's hand went instantly to his side where Ellie knew he carried a weapon. Stay with Thomas, he ordered. All vulnerability vanished. Lock the door. Use the panic button if needed. He was gone before she could respond, leaving Ellie to rush back to Thomas's bedroom, where the boy was already awake, eyes wide with fear. What's happening? He demanded. I don't know, Ellie admitted, moving to secure the door as instructed. But your father will handle it. Thomas nodded, trust in his father, absolute, despite their complicated relationship. It's Castellano, isn't it? Dad's been worried about him for weeks. How do you know that name? Ellie asked sharply. Thomas gave her a look that made him seem far older than 14. I've lived in this house my entire life, Ellie. I know more than people think. Outside, they could hear shouting, the heavy tread of security personnel running. Then abruptly silence. More terrifying than the noise. 10 minutes passed like hours before a gentle knock came at the door. Ellie Thomas, it's me. Marcus's voice, but protocol demanded caution. Security question, Ellie called. Carolyn's favorite flowers were white peonies. He answered without hesitation, the prearranged response confirming his identity. Ellie opened the door to find Marcus standing alone, his suit jacket missing, white shirt rolled up at the sleeves. No visible injuries, but his expression was grim. False alarm, he said, though something in his eyes told Ellie it was anything but. Perimeter sensors triggered by wildlife, most likely. The explanation was for Thomas's benefit, Ellie realized. A comforting lie. Can I go back to sleep now? Thomas asked, stifling a yawn. I have a calculus test tomorrow. Of course, Marcus replied, squeezing his son's shoulder. Everything's fine. Once Thomas had settled back into bed, Marcus led Ellie back to the sitting room. His facade of calm dropped the moment the door closed. Castellano's men, he confirmed in a whisper. Testing our defenses. They didn't breach the perimeter, but they came close. This is escalating quickly, Ellie observed. Yes, more quickly than anticipated. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration. I need to accelerate certain measures. Make arrangements. What kind of arrangements? He hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. Come with me. There's something you should see. Marcus led her through the quiet house to his study, dismissing the security personnel with a nod. Once inside, he locked the door and moved to a bookshelf, pulling a specific volume that caused the entire shelf to swing outward, revealing a hidden room beyond. A panic room, Ellie guessed. Among other things, the space beyond was a command center. Multiple monitors displayed security feeds from around the property. A sophisticated communication system, weapons in locked cabinets, and walls covered with documents, photographs, and maps, all connected with red string in an elaborate web. At the center of it all was a photograph of a man in his 50s, silver-haired and distinguished-looking, but with cold eyes that seemed to pierce through the paper. Victor Castellano. This is what we're facing, Marcus said quietly. Victor has been planning this for years, gathering allies, waiting for the right moment. Ellie scanned the documents, understanding dawning. You've been building a case against him. A legal case. Yes, for the FBI, the state police. Anyone who will listen. Marcus's expression was grim. My father would call it betrayal. The old code doesn't involve law enforcement. But I made a promise to Caroline before she died, that Thomas would have a different life, a legitimate legacy. Ellie studied the evidence wall, connecting pieces of a puzzle she'd only glimpsed before. Castellano knows what you're doing. He suspects. If he knew for certain, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Marcus turned to face her directly. I'm giving you one last chance to leave Ellie. Take the money, start a new life, before you're in too deep. She thought of Thomas sleeping just down the hall, of the man who'd begun to trust her, of the father fighting against his own history to forge something better for his son. I think it's too late for that, she said softly. I'm already in too deep. Marcus's gaze held hers, something like wonder crossing his features. Why risk everything for people you barely know? Ellie thought of the night she'd found Thomas in the snow, of the choice she'd made to help rather than walk away. Sometimes the simplest decisions defined a life's path. Because it's the right thing to do, she answered simply. And because I've lost too many people I care about already. I'm not walking away from Thomas. Or from you. The admission hung between them, too honest, too raw to take back. Marcus stepped closer, close enough that Ellie had to tilt her head to maintain eye contact. I can't promise your safety. I know. But I can promise this. His voice dropped intense and certain. As long as I'm breathing, I will protect you with everything I have. In that moment, standing in a hidden room filled with evidence of danger and darkness, Ellie Sullivan made her final choice: to stay, to fight, to become part of something larger and more complex than she'd ever imagined, a choice that would change everything. 3 months passed since that fateful night in the hidden room. Boston's brutal winter gradually softened into early spring, pale sunlight occasionally breaking through persistent clouds. Inside the Salvatore mansion, another transformation had taken place, subtle but profound. Ellie Sullivan was no longer just an employee. She had become essential to Thomas, to the household, to Marcus himself. Her suite now showed signs of permanent residence: medical textbooks stacked on bedside tables, family photographs arranged on the dresser, a worn leather watch case that had belonged to her father displayed prominently beside her bed. Each morning she slipped the timepiece onto her wrist, a ritual connecting her to the man who had inspired her medical ambitions. The transition hadn't been seamless. During her first week, Ellie had struggled to navigate the unspoken rules of the Salvatore household: when to speak during meals, which staff members handled, which responsibilities, the complex security protocols that govern daily life. Several times she'd found herself lost in the mansion's labyrinthine corridors, embarrassed to ask for directions to rooms she should have remembered. The staff, initially cool and assessing, had gradually warmed to her unpretentious manner, an obvious devotion to Thomas's care. "You're different from the others," Maria, the housekeeper, who had worked for the Salvatores for 20 years, told her one morning. "The other nurses, they wanted the money, the luxury. You watch the boy like he's your own." Mr. Salvatore notices. Ellie had blushed at that, unsure how to respond to the implication that Marcus was watching her as closely as she watched his son. The Salvatore household had gradually adopted a new rhythm with Ellie at its center. Mornings began with Thomas's glucose monitoring, followed by breakfast, where Marcus would join them when not called away on business. The dining table, once a place of stilted conversation, now hosted lively discussions about Thomas's school projects, current events, or medical advancements Ellie had read about. Thomas himself remained the greatest challenge. The first weeks had been difficult, the 14-year-old regarding Ellie with suspicion and testing her limits at every opportunity. He'd forget glucose readings, hide his monitoring equipment, or respond to her questions with monosyllabic grunts. "I don't need another nurse," he'd declared during their second week together. "I've had 7 already. They all quit. You will too." "I'm not a nurse," Ellie had responded calmly. "I'm a medical student who's currently working as a waitress and diabetes management consultant. And I don't quit easily." Something in her straightforward response had caught his attention. Thomas had studied her with eyes so like his father's, assessing, intelligent, guarded. "Dad says you walked away from medical school," he challenged. "Isn't that quitting?" The question had stung, but Ellie recognized the tactic for what it was: a defensive teenager pushing boundaries. "Sometimes life makes choices for us," she'd answered honestly. "My parents died my 3rd year. The medical bills and funeral costs wiped out our savings. I had to choose between finishing school and keeping a roof over my head." She'd held his gaze steadily. "That's not quitting. That's surviving." Thomas had fallen silent, then absorbing this information with surprising thoughtfulness for a 14-year-old. 2 days later, he'd left a medical journal on her bed, open to an article about innovations in diabetes care. A small olive branch she'd gratefully accepted. The turning point came one evening when Thomas experienced a sudden drop in blood sugar during dinner. Instead of panicking or treating him like a patient, Ellie calmly guided him through managing the episode himself. "You know what's happening, right?" she asked, sitting across from him at the table. Thomas nodded, already reaching for his glucose meter. "Hypoglycemia. I feel the symptoms." "Good. What do you need to do?" "Check my levels, then treat based on the numbers," he recited, pricking his finger with practiced ease. Marcus watched from the doorway, silent and observant, as Ellie let Thomas handle his own care while providing gentle guidance. When the boy successfully managed the situation without intervention, the pride in his eyes was unmistakable. "You didn't take over," Thomas said later, surprise evident in his voice. "The other nurses always grabbed everything out of my hands like I was a baby." Ellie smiled. "It's your body, Thomas. I'm just here to help you understand it better." That night, for the first time, Thomas called her Elle instead of Miss Sullivan. From that moment, he had blossomed under her care. His diabetes remained under excellent control, his academic performance improved, and the sullen teenager had given way to a more confident young man. Your pancreas might not work properly, Ellie told him one afternoon as they reviewed his glucose logs, but your brain certainly does. These calculations are perfect. Thomas beamed at the praise, a smile transforming his serious face into something that reminded Ellie startlingly of Marcus. Dad says I might be able to join the basketball team next semester if my numbers stay stable. He confided, hope evident in his voice. I think that's entirely possible, Ellie agreed. Your control has been excellent, and exercise is good for managing blood sugar as long as we adjust your insulin properly. Thomas's expression grew thoughtful. He's different since you came. Dad, I mean. Different how? Ellie asked, trying to keep her tone neutral. Less, I don't know, grim? Thomas shrugged. He smiles more. Actually laughed yesterday when I told him about Mr. Peterson falling asleep during his own lecture. Ellie had noticed the change too. Marcus still carried the weight of his responsibilities, still projected authority and control, but subtle shifts had occurred. The way his expression softened when he entered a room and found her there. The late-night conversations in his study after Thomas went to bed, discussing everything from literature to politics to medicine. The brush of his hand against hers when passing documents, lingering a moment longer than necessary. Moments charged with possibility, yet never acted upon. Both of them aware of the invisible boundaries between employer and employee, between man and woman, between his world and hers. The threat from Victor Castellano had temporarily receded after that night, the increased security measures apparently effective as a deterrent. Little Sicily had reopened more elegant than before, though Ellie hadn't returned to work there. Instead, her professional future had taken an unexpected turn. One morning, a silver-haired man in an impeccable suit arrived at the mansion. Marcus introduced him as Dr. Richard Morrison, Chief of Medicine at Boston Memorial Hospital and former professor at Harvard Medical School. Miss Sullivan, Dr. Morrison greeted her, warmly studying her with intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Marcus tells me you were one of our students, class of 20. Yes, sir, Ellie confirmed, surprised he would remember such details. Though I only completed 3 years. I remember your father, John Sullivan, Dr. Morrison said, causing Ellie's breath to catch. Brilliant emergency physician. Saved my daughter after a car accident in 2008. I never forgot him or his dedication. Ellie swallowed the sudden tightness in her throat. Thank you, sir. That means a lot. Yeah? Morrison glanced at Marcus, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Miss Sullivan, I understand your education was interrupted by circumstances beyond your control. Marcus and I have been discussing possibilities for you to complete your medical degree through a combination of distance learning and accelerated clinical rotations. Ellie's heart thundered in her chest. The program would be tailored around your responsibilities here, Dr. Morrison continued. Harvard has certain flexibility for exceptional cases. Your academic record certainly qualifies. 2 weeks later, Ellie found herself in Dr. Morrison's office at Boston Memorial Hospital, surrounded by the familiar smells of antiseptic and coffee that define medical institutions worldwide. Despite her professional demeanor, her hands trembled slightly as she signed the readmission paperwork. Nervous? Dr. Morrison asked kindly. Terrified, Ellie admitted. It's been 3 years. What if I've forgotten everything? What if I can't balance my responsibilities to Thomas with the program requirements? Dr. Morrison smiled. You diagnosed type 1 diabetic hypoglycemia in the dark on a street corner with no equipment. I'd say your clinical instincts remain intact. He closed her file with finality. As for balance, that's why we've created this flexible program. Marcus has assured me that your duties with Thomas will adapt to accommodate your studies. Marcus arranged all this, didn't he? Ellie asked, though she already knew the answer. He made a compelling case, Dr. Morrison acknowledged. But your academic record and recommendation letters did the rest. You earned this second chance, Ellie. Don't waste it wondering if you deserve it. The wisdom in his words stayed with her as she navigated this new chapter. Late-night study sessions after Thomas was asleep. Online lectures during his school hours. Clinical rotations carefully scheduled around the household security protocols. It was exhausting but exhilarating, rekindling the passion for medicine she'd forced herself to suppress after her parents' deaths. Later, alone with Marcus in his study, Ellie found her voice again. You arranged this. Marcus sat behind his desk, watchful and still. I made a phone call. Dr. Morrison made the arrangements. Your qualifications did the rest. Why? The question emerged barely above a whisper. Talent shouldn't be wasted due to financial circumstances. Marcus replied, his expression unreadable. My father never had the opportunity for education. He worked on the docks from age 14. I was the first Salvatore to attend college. He paused. Besides your medical knowledge benefits, Thomas, consider it an investment. Ellie studied him, seeing beyond the businessman's explanation. Thank you, she said simply. Something flickered in his dark eyes. You're welcome. Their evening conversations grew longer after that, often stretching into the early morning hours. Marcus revealed pieces of himself gradually, like a slowly opening door. His childhood in South Boston, raised by a father whose business required absolute loyalty and fierce protection. His mother's quiet determination that her son would have opportunities she never had. The struggle to balance family legacy with personal ambition. Caroline understood what I was trying to do, he told Ellie one night, swirling amber liquid in a crystal glass. Transitioning the family business toward legitimacy while maintaining respect and position. Walking the line between two worlds. How did you meet her? Ellie asked, curled in an armchair across from him, comfortable in a way she'd never imagined possible in his presence. A smile touched his lips, genuine and tinged with memory. Hospital charity gala. I donated to the children's wing purely for business purposes. Tax benefits, community standing. Carolyn was a pediatric nurse who didn't impress easily. She called me out for checking my phone during a child's speech. Bold move, Ellie observed. She was fearless. Marcus agreed, his voice softening. Saw right through me from the beginning. Loved me anyway. Insisted I could be better than my circumstances dictated. The unspoken parallel hung between them. Another medical professional who saw beyond his exterior. Another chance at redemption. One evening, as Boston's early spring rain pattered against the windows, Marcus broached a subject he'd carefully avoided until now. Victor and I grew up together, he said unexpectedly, staring into the fire. Our fathers were business partners in the old days. He was like an older brother to me once. What happened? Ellie asked, surprised by this revelation. We had different visions for the future, Marcus replied, choosing his words carefully. When my father died, I inherited his position at 32. Young for such responsibility. Victor expected to jointly lead our organizations. He was 40, then more experienced. But my father's will was specific, full control to me alone. He resented you, Ellie guessed. Initially, no. He accepted it, though not gracefully. Marcus's expression darkened. The real break came later. When I met Caroline, began seeing possibilities beyond the family business. Victor saw it as betrayal. Becoming soft, he called it. A bitter smile touched his lips. When Thomas was born, I accelerated plans to legitimize our enterprises. Victor opposed every step, claiming I was destroying our heritage, dishonoring our fathers. Is that when you became enemies? No, we were still civil despite disagreements, until Caroline's accident. Marcus's expression hardened. It wasn't an accident, never proven, but I knew. Victor sending a message about the consequences of change. The revelation settled between them, heavy with implication. Not just a business rival, but a man who had once been family, twisted by ideology into something monstrous. I'm sorry, Ellie said softly, understanding now the depth of his determination to protect Thomas at any cost. It was 8 years ago, Marcus replied, voice carefully neutral. Thomas was 6, too young to understand, but old enough to feel the loss acutely. This explains so much about both father and son. Thomas's defensive shell, Marcus's hypervigilance. A family shaped by loss and the constant shadow of threat. Throughout these months, Ellie had maintained her connection to the world outside the Salvatore mansion. Weekly phone calls to her former co-workers at Little Sicily. Regular visits to Mrs. Rose Peterson, her elderly neighbor who had been like family after Ellie's parents died. These touchstones kept her grounded, reminded her of who she was beyond her role in the Salvatore household. You should bring Mrs. Peterson here for dinner sometime, Marcus suggested after Ellie mentioned her weekly visit. Thomas would benefit from expanding his social circle beyond security personnel and tutors. Ellie raised an eyebrow. You want to subject your private sanctuary to a 75-year-old retired librarian who will absolutely ask inappropriate personal questions and probably comment on your security measures. A smile tugged at Marcus's lips. She sounds formidable. She is, Ellie confirmed. She'll interrogate you about your intentions toward me within the first 15 minutes. And what should I tell her about my intentions? Marcus asked, his tone deliberately casual, though his eyes were anything but. The question hung between them, charged with possibility. Before Ellie could formulate a response, Marcus's phone chimed with an incoming message. The moment slipped away, unresolved. The evening of the Children's Hospital benefit marked the first time Ellie accompanied the Salvatores to a public event. Marcus had insisted, overriding her protests about not belonging in such company. A designer arrived with dresses for her approval, another boundary between employer and something more dissolving with each passing day. "Dad, your jaw is going to hit the floor," Thomas teased as they waited in the foyer for Ellie to descend the staircase. Marcus straightened his bow tie, a rare sign of nervousness. "That's hardly appropriate, Thomas." Whatever retort his son planned died on his lips as Ellie appeared at the top of the stairs. The midnight blue gown skimmed her figure, modest yet elegant, transformed the waitress into something from another world. Her blonde hair was swept up, revealing the graceful line of her neck. Her only jewelry, her father's watch on her wrist. Marcus went completely still, his expression impossible to read. Thomas elbowed him subtly. "You look beautiful," Marcus finally said, his voice lower than usual. "Thank you," Ellie replied, feeling strangely vulnerable. "Is it appropriate? I've never attended anything like this before." "Perfect," Marcus assured her, offering his arm as she reached the bottom step. "You'll outshine everyone there." The ballroom of the Fairmont Copley Plaza Hotel glittered with crystal and wealth. Boston's elite circulated in designer finery, air-kissing and networking beneath chandeliers that had witnessed generations of such gatherings. Ellie felt eyes following their trio, curious, assessing, sometimes hostile. "Ignore them," Marcus murmured, his hand warm at the small of her back. "Half are jealous, half are looking for gossip. None matter." Thomas remained close to Ellie's side, clearly uncomfortable in these surroundings despite having been raised in wealth. "Everyone's staring at us," he muttered. "Because your father is important," Ellie replied quietly. "And because you look very handsome in your tuxedo." The boy blushed, pleased despite himself. "Whatever. This bow tie is strangling me." "Check your glucose level," Ellie reminded him. "Events like this can affect your numbers." "Stress, unusual food timing." Thomas nodded, slipping away to the restroom with his monitoring kit. Ellie watched him go, maternal concern overtaking social anxiety. "You've been good for him." Marcus observed, his eyes following his son. "He trusts you. That's rare." "He's a wonderful young man," Ellie said sincerely. "You've raised him well, especially under difficult circumstances." "We've managed," Marcus acknowledged, "but he needs more than management. He needs nurturing, something I'm not particularly skilled at." "I disagree," Ellie countered. "You're more nurturing than you realize. The way you listen when he speaks, how you support his interests, your patience with his condition." Marcus looked surprised, then thoughtful. "Perhaps. Though I suspect recent improvements in our relationship have more to do with your influence than my parenting skills." Their conversation was interrupted by Thomas's return, his expression unusually serious. "Dad, that man over there keeps staring at us. The one with the silver hair by the bar." Marcus turned casually, his body language relaxed even as his eyes sharpened. Ellie followed his gaze to an elegant man in his 50s, distinguished looking with silver hair and cold eyes she recognized immediately from the photographs in Marcus's secret room. "Victor Castellano." "Thomas," Marcus said calmly, "go find Dr. Morrison and thank him for inviting us. Remain with him until I come for you." The boy hesitated. "But..." "Now, Thomas." The steel beneath the quiet command brooked no argument. Once Thomas had reluctantly departed, Marcus turned to Ellie. "Stay close to me. Don't react to anything he says." Victor Castellano approached with the confidence of a man accustomed to controlling rooms. Two younger men flanked him at a respectful distance, clearly security, though they wore tuxedos instead of obvious earpieces. "Marcus," Victor greeted, his voice-cultured accent more pronounced than Marcus's. "Unexpected seeing you here. Charity was never your father's priority." "Times change, Victor," Marcus replied evenly. "The Salvatore family has always evolved with them." Victor's cold gaze shifted to Ellie, assessing her with uncomfortable intensity. "And this lovely creature must be Miss Sullivan." the waitress playing nurse. His smile never reached his eyes. Your reputation precedes you, my dear. Ellie maintained her composure, though her heart hammered against her ribs. Mr. Castellano, I've heard about you as well. Something dangerous flickered in his expression. Have you? Now I wonder what Marcus has told you. Only what's necessary, Marcus interjected smoothly. Ellie's primary concern is Thomas's well-being. Victor took a sip of champagne, his eyes never leaving Ellie's face. How fortunate for young Thomas to have such dedicated care. Diabetes can be so unpredictable, can it? One moment find the next. Crisis. The threat behind his words was unmistakable. Ellie felt Marcus tense beside her. Medical science has advanced considerably, she replied, keeping her voice steady. With proper management, type 1 diabetics lead completely normal lives. Proper management, Victor echoed. Yes, I imagine that requires constant vigilance. His gaze shifted back to Marcus. Much like business relationships, one moment of inattention can prove catastrophic. Is there a point to this conversation, Victor? Marcus asked, his tone pleasant but his eyes hard. Victor smiled, merely extending social courtesies and expressing my admiration for your new family arrangement. He inclined his head toward Ellie. A pleasure meeting you officially, Miss Sullivan. I do hope we'll have the opportunity for a longer conversation someday. With that, he glided away, his security detail following at a discreet distance. He's threatening Thomas, Ellie whispered once he was out of earshot. And me. Yes, Marcus confirmed, his expression darkening. Let's find Thomas. We're leaving. Later, after ensuring Thomas was safely asleep in his room with security posted outside Ellie, and Marcus reconvened in his study. Marcus had shed his bow tie and jacket, pacing the room like a caged predator. His appearance wasn't coincidence, he stated grimly. Victor knew we would attend. He orchestrated that encounter. To what end? Ellie asked, still in her evening gown, the glamour of the night tarnished by fear. To demonstrate access, to remind me he can reach us even in supposedly secure environments. Marcus stopped pacing, running a hand through his dark hair. And to see you. Meanwhile, to assess your importance, your potential value as leverage. His jaw tightened, and he found his answer in the way I responded to his threats. Ellie processed this, understanding the implication. Her presence in the Salvatore household had created a new vulnerability, emotional rather than physical. What happens now, she asked. We accelerate our timetable, Marcus replied. The evidence against Victor is nearly complete. Another month, perhaps two, before we can move. And until then, Marcus met her gaze directly. We increase security again. Thomas doesn't leave the property except for school with doubled protection. And you? He hesitated. Don't say it, Ellie warned. You should consider temporarily relocating. For your safety. No, wow. The word emerged with surprising force. I won't abandon Thomas when he needs me most. Or you, she added more softly. Something flickered in Marcus's eyes. Frustration, admiration, something deeper he wouldn't name. I can't guarantee your safety, Ellie. You've said that before. My answer hasn't changed. Marcus moved closer, close enough that she could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, smell the subtle cologne that had become familiar. Why? He asked, his voice low and intense. Why risk everything for us? Because I care, Ellie answered simply. About Thomas, about you. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibility. Then Marcus stepped back, restraint reasserting itself. Get some rest, he said finally. Tomorrow we'll review security protocols. Again. The following weeks brought changes to Ellie's routine. Her medical studies intensified under Dr. Morrison's guidance. The promised distance learning program proved challenging but exhilarating, awakening the part of her that had grieved the loss of her medical career. Thomas sometimes joined her study sessions, his natural intelligence and curiosity making him an excellent impromptu quiz partner. One evening, as they reviewed cardiovascular anatomy, Thomas asked unexpectedly, "Do you ever regret finding me that night on Franklin Avenue?" Ellie looked up from her textbook, surprised. What? No, of course not. Why would you ask that? The boy shrugged, feigning casualness. Because of everything that's happened since, the danger, having to live with all this security, being stuck with us. Thomas, Ellie said, gently closing her book. Finding you that night was one of the most important moments of my life. I've never regretted it for a second, even though it put you in danger. Even then, she smiled. Some things are worth the risk. Thomas absorbed this, then asked tentatively, do you like my dad? Not just as your boss, but, you know. Heat rose in Ellie's cheeks. That's a complicated question. Not really, Thomas countered with teenage directness. Either you do or you don't. Ellie chose her words carefully. I respect your father very much. I admire his dedication to you, his intelligence, his determination to build something better. That's not what I asked, Thomas persisted. I know, Ellie acknowledged, but it's all I can answer right now. The boy seemed to accept this, returning to the textbook with a small smile that suggested he'd received the confirmation he sought, despite her evasion. Later that night, unable to sleep, Ellie wandered to the kitchen for tea. She found Marcus already there, suit jacket discarded, shirt sleeves rolled up, reviewing documents at the counter. Trouble sleeping? He asked without looking up. Too much caffeine while studying, she admitted, filling the kettle. You're up late too. Standard operating hours for me. He set aside his papers. How are the studies progressing? Well, Dr. Morrison is an excellent mentor. Ellie leaned against the counter, studying him. Thomas asked me today if I regret finding him that night. Marcus looked up sharply. What prompted that? Concern about putting me in danger, I think. Worry that I feel trapped here. Do you, Marcus asked, his voice carefully neutral. Feel trapped? No. Ellie met his gaze steadily. I'm here by choice. Every day. Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes. Thomas also asked if I like you. Ellie continued, surprising herself with her boldness. Not just as my employer, but more personally. Marcus went very still. What did you tell him? That it was complicated. Ellie's heart thundered in her chest. Was that the wrong answer? No, Marcus said quietly. It was honest. The air between them thickened with unspoken words. Marcus stood, moving around the counter toward her, stopping close enough that Ellie had to tilt her head to maintain eye contact. What would you have said, he asked, his voice deeper than usual, if it wasn't complicated? Before she could answer, his phone rang shrilly, shattering the moment. Marcus checked the screen, his expression instantly transforming. I need to take this, he said, already moving toward the door. We'll continue later. But later never came. The next morning brought chaos that swept away any possibility of personal conversations. Ellie was reviewing glucose monitoring data with Thomas when Marcus burst into the room, his expression grimmer than she'd ever seen. Thomas, go to your room and pack an overnight bag. Essentials only. The boy looked up alarmed. Dad, what's happening? Now, Thomas. The command brooked no argument. Once his son had reluctantly departed, Marcus turned to Ellie. There's been an incident. Rose Peterson, your former neighbor. She's missing from her apartment. Ellie's blood ran cold. Rose, but she never goes anywhere alone. She can barely walk without her cane. Exactly. Marcus's face was hard. There was a struggle, signs of forced entry. The implication hit Ellie like physical blow. Castellano, she whispered. He took her because of me. It appears so, Marcus confirmed. We received this 20 minutes ago. He handed her his phone, displaying a text message from an unknown number. The old lady would like company more her own age. Perhaps Mr. Salvatore would join her for tea alone. 3 p.m., you know the place. Horror and guilt twisted in Ellie's stomach. This is my fault. Rose has nothing to do with any of this. She's 75 years old, for God's sake. This is Victor's fault, Marcus corrected firmly, and his miscalculation. He expects me to send security to rescue your friend while he targets Thomas here. Then you have to send someone, Ellie insisted. Rose needs help. I'm sending someone, Marcus agreed. Myself. What? Ellie stared at him in disbelief. That's exactly what he wants. No, Marcus countered. He wants me to send men dividing our security forces. He expects me to prioritize Thomas over your connection. It's the one scenario he hasn't planned for. I'm coming with you, Ellie said immediately. Absolutely not. Rose is my friend, my responsibility. Her chin lifted in the stubborn gesture Marcus had come to know well. And I have medical training. She might need it. Marcus studied her for a long moment, clearly weighing options. If you come, you follow my instructions exactly. No heroics, no arguments. Agreed. And you take this. He removed a small device from his pocket. Tracking beacon. If anything happens to me, press this button and my team will come. Get Rose out first no matter what. The gravity of his words sank in. This wasn't a rescue mission. It was potentially walking into a trap. The private medical suite at Boston Memorial Hospital radiated serenity, soft beige walls, discreet medical equipment, a large window overlooking the city skyline. Rose Peterson rested comfortably in a hospital bed that likely cost more per night than her monthly rent. Ellie sat beside her, monitoring the elderly woman's vital signs, more from habit than necessity. The doctors had confirmed no physical injuries, merely dehydration and emotional distress from the ordeal. This room is nicer than my entire apartment, Rose marveled, fingering the Egyptian cotton sheets. I could get used to this kind of treatment. Ellie smiled, relieved to see her friend recovering her spirit. Marcus insisted on the best care. Marcus, is it? Rose's eyes twinkled with knowing. Not Mr. Salvatore anymore. Heat rose in Ellie's cheeks. 3 days had passed since the warehouse confrontation, since the moment everything between them had changed. 3 days of cautious navigation through uncharted emotional territory of stolen glances and lingering touches when Thomas wasn't watching. It's complicated, Ellie admitted, adjusting Rose's pillows unnecessarily. The best things usually are dear. Rose patted Ellie's hand. I may be old, but I remember what it looks like when a man cares deeply for a woman. The way he looks at you when you're not watching. Before Ellie could respond, the door opened. Marcus entered, followed by Thomas, who carried a bouquet of pink roses. Mrs. Peterson, Marcus greeted formally. I trust you're receiving everything you need. More than enough, Mr. Salvatore, Rose replied, her eyes shrewd as they moved between him and Ellie. Your generosity is overwhelming. Thomas approached the bed, awkwardly presenting the flowers. These are for you. Elle said they're your favorite. Rose accepted them with genuine delight. How thoughtful. And you must be Thomas. Ellie talks about you constantly. The boy brightened. She does. Oh yes, says you're brilliant with numbers and might have a future in medicine. Rose winked. She's quite proud of you. Thomas glanced at Ellie, pleased but embarrassed by the praise. Ellie felt Marcus watching them, his expression softening in a way that transformed his usually stern features. Thomas, Marcus said after a moment, perhaps you could ask the nurse about a vase for Mrs. Peterson's flowers. Once Thomas had left on his mission, the atmosphere in the room shifted subtly. Rose looked directly at Marcus, all pretense of fragility vanishing. Mr. Salvatore, I gather I was kidnapped because of my connection to Ellie, who works for you, she stated bluntly. I think I deserve some explanation. Marcus considered the elderly woman with newfound respect. You're right, Mrs. Peterson. The situation involved a business rival using underhanded tactics to gain leverage. I deeply regret your involvement. These business rivals, they won't be coming back, will they? Rose asked, her tone suggesting she understood more than she let on. No, Marcus assured her. The authorities are handling the matter now. You have nothing to fear. Rose nodded, satisfied. Good. Now about Ellie. Rose, Ellie interjected, alarmed at where this conversation might be heading. The elderly woman waved her objection away. Hush, dear. Mr. Salvatore and I need to understand each other. Her gaze fixed on Marcus with surprising intensity. That girl has suffered enough loss in her life. Her parents were wonderful people who left this world too soon. She deserves happiness. Marcus met her gaze steadily. On that, we are in complete agreement. Are we? Rose challenged. Because from what little I understand, your world seems dangerous. Ellie nearly lost me just as she lost her parents. I won't have her heart broken again. The directness of the elderly woman's concern caught Marcus off guard. Ellie watched, breath held, as emotions played across his usually guarded features. Mrs. Peterson, he finally said, his voice low and sincere, I can't promise a life without danger, but I can promise that Ellie's well-being, her happiness has become my highest priority, second only to my son's safety. Rose studied him intently, then nodded once. See that it remains so. Thomas returned with a nurse carrying a crystal vase, interrupting the charged moment. As arrangements were made for Rose's eventual discharge to a new apartment Marcus had secured in a building with excellent security, Ellie felt something fundamental shift between them all. A quiet acknowledgement of connections that transcended employer and employee. A makeshift family forming from unlikely pieces. Back at the Salvatore mansion that evening, Ellie found Marcus in his study phone pressed to his ear, expression grim. He waved her in, concluding his call with terse instructions she couldn't quite follow. Problems? She asked when he hung up. Developments, he corrected, running a hand through his dark hair. Victor is refusing to cooperate with authorities, claiming the evidence is fabricated. Will that work? Temporarily, perhaps. His legal team is formidable. Marcus sighed, the weight of decades-old conflicts evident in his posture. But the evidence is substantial. His organization is already fracturing. It's only a matter of time. Ellie moved closer, perching on the edge of his desk. And the danger to Thomas? To us, reduced, not eliminated, he answered honestly. Victor's direct influence is contained for now, but he has allies, people who might act out of misguided loyalty. So we remain vigilant, Ellie concluded. Yes. Marcus studied her, something like wonder crossing his features. How are you not terrified by all this? A small smile touched her lips. Who says I'm not? I just refuse to let fear dictate my choices. Marcus reached for her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. Rose Peterson is a formidable woman. She practically raised me after my parents died, Ellie explained. Checked on me daily, made sure I ate, listened when I needed to talk. Family isn't always blood. No, Marcus agreed, thinking of his own complex family history. Sometimes it's chosen. The moment stretched between them, intimate and charged with possibility. Since their first kiss 3 days ago, they had moved carefully, both aware of Thomas's perceptiveness and the delicate nature of their evolving relationship. What now? Ellie asked softly. Before Marcus could answer, a knock at the door announced Thomas's arrival. The boy entered without waiting for permission, a habit that spoke of his comfort in his father's presence, a relatively new development. Dad, I was thinking about summer plans, he began, then stopped abruptly, noticing their joined hands. His expression shifted from surprise to smug satisfaction. Finally. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Finally. I was wondering how long it would take you two to admit the obvious, Thomas explained with teenage bluntness. Even Johnston was taking bets with his security team. Ellie felt heat rise in her cheeks, but Marcus merely looked amused. I see. And how do you feel about this development? Thomas shrugged with studied casualness that couldn't quite conceal his genuine happiness. It's cool. Ellie's already basically family anyway. The simple acceptance in his words touched Ellie deeply. Marcus squeezed her hand before releasing it, turning his attention to his son. You mentioned summer plans? Yeah, Thomas continued, flopping into an armchair. I was thinking, since things are safer now with that Castellano guy locked up, maybe we could actually go somewhere, the three of us. The hopefulness in his voice revealed how rarely the Salvatores had enjoyed normal family experiences. Like vacations. Marcus glanced at Ellie, including her in the decision-making process without words. That sounds like an excellent idea, she agreed. Where were you thinking? The lake house in Vermont, Thomas suggested. We haven't been since Mom. He trailed off, the memory of Caroline still tender, despite the passing years. Marcus's expression softened. The lake house would be perfect, he agreed. Your mother loved it there. She'd be happy to know we're using it again. The conversation shifted to summer plans, Thomas growing animated as he described the lake, the woods activities they could enjoy together. Ellie watched father and son interact, marveling at the transformation in both since that winter night 6 months ago. Thomas more confident, Marcus more openly affectionate. Later, after Thomas had gone to bed, Ellie and Marcus walked the mansion's gardens. The early summer evening was perfect, warm air, scented with roses, stars emerging in a deepening blue sky. Marcus's security detail maintained a discreet distance, a reminder that vigilance remained necessary despite Victor's containment. Thomas seems genuinely happy about us, Ellie observed, her arm linked through Marcus's. He's wanted a complete family again for a long time, Marcus replied, though I doubt he ever imagined it would come in the form of a waitress who found him collapsed in the snow. Former waitress, Ellie corrected with a smile. Current medical student and future doctor, Marcus added, pride evident in his voice. DeMorrison tells me your progress is exceptional, top of your cohort. I've had excellent support. Ellie paused beneath a rose-covered archway. Marcus, there's something we need to discuss. About us, about the future. He turned to face her, moonlight silvering his features. That sounds ominous. Not ominous, just important. Ellie took a deep breath, organizing her thoughts. I need to maintain my independence, even as we explore what's between us. My identity can't be subsumed into the Salvatore world. Marcus studied her thoughtfully. What does that mean, practically? It means I continue my medical studies, eventually practice medicine. It means I make my own money, have my own career. She met his gaze directly. It means partnership, not protection. A smile touched his lips. Have I been overprotective? You've been exactly who you are, Ellie replied gently. A man accustomed to control, to arranging the world to his specifications. It's part of what makes you an effective leader, a good father. But in a relationship between equals, it could become suffocating, Marcus finished for her. I understand. Do you, Ellie pressed? Because your world has very defined roles, the man in charge, women and children protected. I don't fit neatly into those categories. Marcus considered this, his expression thoughtful. My father believed in absolute authority, the patriarch who made decisions unquestioned. My mother accepted this arrangement, though I sometimes wondered at what cost to her spirit. He took Ellie's hands in his. Caroline challenged that model, demanded partnership. It wasn't always easy for me, but our relationship was stronger for it. And with me, with you, Marcus said softly, I'm learning that strength comes in many forms. That control is sometimes an illusion. That trust means allowing vulnerability. His hands tightened on hers. I can't promise I won't be protective. It's ingrained too deeply. But I can promise to respect your independence, your dreams, your identity outside of any relationship with me. Ellie studied his face, seeing the sincerity behind his words. That's all I ask. Is it? Marcus asked, a hint of teasing entering his voice. Because if you have other requests, now would be the time. I find myself unusually agreeable tonight. Laughter bubbled up, releasing the tension. I'll keep that in mind. He drew her closer, one hand rising to cup her cheek. Ellie Sullivan, you've upended my carefully ordered existence. Challenged my assumptions. Rearranged my priorities. His thumb traced the curve of her lower lip, and I've never been more grateful for any disruption in my life. Their kiss deepened under the rose-covered archway, the scent of flowers surrounding them, security discreetly averting their eyes, the future unfolding with unexpected promise. 4 weeks later, the tranquility of their evolving family life shattered with a single phone call. Marcus took it in his study, emerging with an expression Ellie had hoped never to see again, the cold, dangerous focus that signaled serious trouble. Victor Castellano has escaped custody, he announced without preamble, finding Ellie and Thomas in the kitchen, preparing dinner together. During transport to a court hearing, 2 U.S. Marshals dead. Thomas froze, knife hovering over the tomato he'd been slicing. But you said he was locked up for good. He should have been, Marcus replied grimly. Someone helped him, someone with access and resources. What does this mean? Ellie asked, already calculating implications. It means we implement maximum security protocols immediately. Marcus's phone buzzed continuously with incoming messages. Thomas, no school until further notice. Remote learning only. Ellie, all medical rotations suspended. My clinical rotation starts next week, Ellie protested. I can't just... We'll make arrangements with Dr. Morrison. Marcus interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. Victor will target what I value most. He knows exactly who that is now. Thomas set down his knife with deliberate calm. We've been through this before. We'll handle it. The maturity in the boy's response caught both adults by surprise. Marcus placed a hand on his son's shoulder, pride momentarily displacing concern. Yes, we will, he agreed, together. The following days transformed the mansion into a fortress. Additional security personnel patrolled the grounds. Windows were reinforced. Vehicles swept for tracking devices. Thomas accepted the restrictions with remarkable grace, though Ellie caught him staring wistfully out windows at the summer day he couldn't enjoy. Marcus worked relentlessly, coordinating with law enforcement, activating intelligence networks tracking every possible lead on Victor's whereabouts. Ellie often found him in his study at dawn, having worked through the night, determination etched in the lines of his face. "You need rest," she told him on the fifth morning, setting coffee beside his cluttered desk. "Exhaustion impairs judgment. I'll rest when Victor is back in custody," he replied, though he accepted the coffee gratefully. "Or dead." The coldness in his tone sent a chill through Ellie. "Marcus, I know what you're thinking," he said, rubbing his eyes, "that I'm reverting to old patterns. Violence is solution. Are you—" His gaze met hers conflicted. "I want to protect what I love, Ellie, by any means necessary." The admission of love slipped casually into conversation hung between them. They had carefully avoided the word until now, though its presence had been felt. "There are many ways to protect those you love," Ellie said softly. "Not all require bloodshed." Marcus stood moving to the window, scanning the grounds with habitual vigilance. The legal route failed. Victor escaped justice. "What would you have me do? Trust the authorities to recapture him," Ellie suggested, joining him at the window. "Focus on keeping Thomas safe without surrendering everything we built together." "And if that's not enough," Marcus challenged, "if Victor gets past our defenses, reaches Thomas, reaches you." Ellie placed a hand on his arm, feeling the tension in his muscles. "Then we face that together too. But I won't let fear of what might happen destroy what we already have." Something in her words resonated. Marcus covered her hand with his own. "When did you become the voice of reason in this relationship?" "I've always been reasonable," Ellie countered with a smile. "You're just finally listening." The moment of connection strengthened them both, a reminder of what they were fighting to preserve. Their forehead touched briefly, drawing strength from each other before Marcus returned to his work with renewed focus. 2 weeks into the heightened security measures, Thomas approached Ellie in the library, where she studied medical texts during her enforced absence from clinical rotations. "I have an idea," he announced, dropping into the chair opposite hers. "But Dad won't like it." Ellie marked her place in the textbook, giving him her full attention. "What kind of idea, bait?" The single word sent a chill down her spine. "Thomas, hear me out," he insisted, leaning forward. "Castellano wants to hurt Dad, right? The best way to do that is through me. So what if we make him think he can get to me, draw him out somewhere controlled, where law enforcement is waiting?" "Absolutely not," Ellie replied immediately. "Your father would never agree to put you at risk." "But I wouldn't really be at risk," Thomas argued. "It would be controlled. And I'm sick of being trapped here, Ellie. We all are." She studied him, seeing the intelligence and determination in his young face. "So like his father. Have you discussed this with Marcus?" "Not yet," Thomas admitted. "I wanted your support first. He listens to you." "This isn't about who he listens to," Ellie countered. "It's about your safety, which is non-negotiable." "But, Thomas," she interrupted gently, "I understand your frustration, but using yourself as bait is not the answer." The boy slumped back in his chair, disappointed but not surprised. "Then we just keep living like prisoners. For how long until Castellano dies of old age?" The question struck at the heart of their dilemma. How long could they sustain this state of siege? What kind of life was this for a 14-year-old boy? "Let me talk to your father," Ellie finally had said. "Not about using you as bait, that's off the table, but about finding a more proactive solution." Thomas brightened slightly. "Really? Really?" Ellie reached across to squeeze his hand. "We'll figure this out. Together." That evening, after Thomas had gone to bed, Ellie found Marcus in his secret room, studying surveillance footage on multiple screens. He looked exhausted, the strain of constant vigilance etching new lines around his eyes. "Thomas is struggling," she said without preamble. "We all are." Marcus sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know, but safety takes precedence over comfort." "For how long?" Ellie challenged, echoing Thomas's earlier question. "We can't live indefinitely under these conditions. Thomas needs normalcy, school, friends, fresh air. And he'll have those things once Victor is apprehended." "When will that be? Days, weeks, months?" Ellie moved closer, gesturing at the surveillance screens. "This isn't sustainable, Marcus. We need another approach." He turned to face her fully. "What do you suggest?" "A controlled encounter," Ellie proposed carefully. "Not using Thomas as bait," she added quickly, seeing his expression darken. but perhaps using me. Absolutely not. The words emerged like steel. Listen to me, Ellie insisted. Victor knows I'm important to you. He's proven that already by targeting Rose. If he believed he could reach me, draw you out, this is not open for discussion, Marcus stated flatly. I will not place you in danger. I'm already in danger, Ellie countered. We all are. The difference is whether we choose our ground or let Victor dictate terms. Marcus stared at her, conflict evident in his eyes. You're asking me to use you as bait. I'm offering to help end this, Ellie corrected, for all of us. The silence stretched between them, tension palpable. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice low and controlled. If, and I stress, if I were to consider such a plan, it would require extensive preparation, controlled environment, multiple backup protocols, coordination with law enforcement. Hope flickered in Ellie's chest. Of course, all of that. And Thomas remains completely removed from any operation, Marcus continued. Non-negotiable. Agreed. Marcus studied her intently. Why are you willing to take this risk, Ellie? Why place yourself in danger? The question deserved an honest answer. Ellie touched her father's watch, drawing strength from the familiar weight on her wrist. Because sometimes healing requires risk, she said simply. As a doctor, I'll ask patients to undergo difficult treatments for the chance at long-term health. This is no different, short-term risk for long-term safety for all of us. Something shifted in Marcus's expression, respect, admiration, perhaps even love. We'll discuss options, he conceded. Nothing more at this point. It was enough. The seed had been planted. 3 days later, a plan took shape. Not Ellie's original suggestion, but a variation that Marcus could tolerate. Intelligence had located one of Victor's closest associates, Anthony Ricci, his financial manager and advisor. The man who likely orchestrated the escape. Ricci was scheduled to attend a charity auction at the Fairmont Copley Plaza, the same hotel where they had encountered Victor months earlier. We create the appearance of vulnerability, Marcus explained to a small group gathered in his study, Ellie, his security chief Dominic, and FBI Special Agent Sarah Chen. Make Ricci believe he can access information about our security protocols, Thomas's schedule. And I'm the vulnerability, Ellie concluded. You attend the auction as a representative of the Salvatore Family Foundation. Marcus continued, his tone professional, despite the personal stakes. Security present, but seemingly minimal. Ricci approaches as our intelligence suggests he will. The conversation is recorded, providing evidence of conspiracy. And when he makes contact, Ellie asked, you engage briefly, then excuse yourself. Law enforcement moves in once you're clear. Marcus looked to Agent Chen. Correct, the FBI agent nodded. We'll have agents throughout the venue. Ms. Sullivan will wear a wire. Once we have actionable evidence, we move. And if Ricci leads us to Victor, Dominic questioned. All the better, Agent Chen replied. But our primary objective is Ricci himself. He's the key to Castellano's operation now. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Use Castellano's own tactics against him, target those close to one's enemy. The symmetry wasn't lost on Ellie. What about Thomas? She asked. Where will he be during this operation? Secure location, Marcus answered. Off-site with my most trusted security team. Dominic will personally oversee his protection. Preparations consumed the next 48 hours. Ellie was fitted with a discreet recording device, rehearsed potential conversations, memorized exits and security protocols. Throughout, Marcus remained professionally distant, compartmentalizing emotions to focus on operational details. Only late the night before the auction did he allow his facade to crack. Finding Ellie on the terrace, gazing at stars barely visible through Boston's light pollution, he approached silently. Having second thoughts, he asked quietly. No, Ellie replied, turning to face him. Just reflecting on how much has changed since that night in the snow. How many twists and turns led us here. Marcus moved closer, moonlight silvering his features. You can still change your mind. No one would blame you. I would blame myself, Ellie countered gently, if something happened that I could have prevented. His hand found her fingers intertwining. I've spent my life protecting people through force, through fear, through control. This approach, using intelligence, patience, legal, means it doesn't come naturally. But it's the right approach, Ellie assured him. For Thomas's future. For ours. For ours, Marcus echoed the words carrying weight. His free hand rose to cup her cheek. When this is over, when this is over, Ellie finished for him, we'll have our lives back, all of us. The kiss they shared beneath the stars carried promise and determination, sealing their commitment to the path ahead. The Fairmont Copley Plaza's grand ballroom glittered with wealth and influence the following evening. Boston's elite mingled among auction items, rare art, exotic vacations, exclusive experiences, all benefiting children's medical research. Ellie moved through the crowd in a midnight blue gown, hair elegantly styled, looking every inch the foundation representative she was pretending to be. Marcus had remained at the mansion, maintaining the fiction that he was unaware of her attendance. In reality, he monitored the operation remotely, connected via secure communications to both Ellie's wire and Agent Chen's team. Target has entered the ballroom, a voice murmured in Ellie's discreet earpiece. North entrance, moving toward the bar. Ellie continued her circuit of the auction items, pausing at a painting with apparent interest, positioning herself where Ricci would inevitably notice her. The wait wasn't long. Miss Sullivan, a smooth voice greeted her. What a pleasant surprise. Anthony Ricci stood before her, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, handsome in a polished, artificial way. His smile never reached his eyes. Mr. Ricci, Ellie acknowledged, feigning mild surprise. I don't believe we've been formally introduced. A regrettable oversight, he replied smoothly. I've had business dealings with Marcus Salvatore in the past. I'm surprised to see you here without him. Ellie offered a practiced smile. The Foundation's work continues regardless of security concerns. The Children's Hospital is a cause close to my heart. Admirable dedication, Ricci commented, signaling for champagne from a passing waiter, though perhaps risky given recent developments. Marcus has security protocols in place, Ellie replied, accepting a glass but not drinking, though I admit they can be stifling at times, especially for Thomas. Ricci's interest visibly sharpened. The boy must find it difficult being so restricted. Teenagers need freedom, Ellie agreed, deliberately vague. School activities, sports, friends. Security makes that challenging. Indeed, Ricci murmured. I imagine certain scheduling adaptations have been necessary. The fishing expedition was obvious. Ellie allowed a carefully calculated sigh of frustration. The constant changes to routines, secure transport arrangements, alternate routes. It's exhausting to keep track of, particularly when Marcus insists on personally reviewing every detail. He always was a micromanager, Ricci commented with false sympathy. Perhaps if you shared some of these arrangements, I might offer suggestions, having dealt with similar situations in the past. There it was, the request for information. The wire beneath Ellie's dress captured every word. That's very kind, she replied, though I should be cautious discussing such matters. Marcus is, protective. Of course, Ricci assured her. Discretion is understood. Perhaps we could continue this conversation somewhere more private. The terrace, perhaps, warning bells sounded in Ellie's mind. The plan called for her to disengage at this point, having obtained sufficient evidence of Ricci's intentions. Actually, I should return to the auction, she demurred. I've promised to bid on the Children's Hospital package. Ricci's hand closed around her arm grip, tight enough to bruise. I insist, Miss Sullivan. Mr. Castellano would be most disappointed if we didn't chat further. Ellie's pulse spiked. This wasn't part of the plan. Victor was supposed to be elsewhere, not connected to tonight's events. Is Victor here? She asked, voice steady despite her racing heart. Ricci's smile turned predatory. Let's say he's very nearby and very eager to resolve his unfinished business with the Salvatore family. In her earpiece, Agent Chen's voice crackled with urgency. Maintain position, Miss Sullivan. Extraction team moving now. Ellie glanced around discreetly, noting FBI agents converging from multiple directions. Only seconds until intervention. She needed to keep Ricci talking, establish a clearer connection to Victor. What exactly does Victor want? She asked, allowing fear to show in her expression. Justice, Ricci replied. Marcus betrayed decades of tradition of loyalty, handed evidence to federal authorities. Such actions demand consequences. And I'm to be one of those consequences. Ricci's grip tightened. Your leverage, Miss Sullivan. Nothing more. FBI. Agent Chen's voice rang out as she appeared beside them, badge displayed. Anthony Ricci, you're under arrest for conspiracy, aiding a federal fugitive and accessory to murder. Chaos erupted. Guests scattered, security converged, Ricci's face contorted with rage. As agents secured him, Ellie caught movement at the ballroom's far entrance. A glimpse of silver hair, cold eyes meeting hers across the distance. Victor Castellano watching as his plan unraveled. Their eyes locked for a suspended moment before Victor turned, disappearing into the crowd. Ellie's voice rose urgently. Agent Chen Castellano is here, north entrance. The FBI team mobilized instantly, agents rushing toward the indicated location. In her earpiece, Marcus's voice tense with controlled fear. Ellie, get out now. Extraction team at the South Service entrance. Ellie moved swiftly through the panicked crowd, following security personnel toward the designated exit. Behind her, shouts and commotion suggested a pursuit in progress. The service corridor stretched before her, security escort guiding her toward safety. They had nearly reached the exit when a figure stepped from a side passage. Victor Castellano, alone, but armed, blocking their escape route. Miss Sullivan, he greeted, as calm as if they'd met at a social function. I believe we have unfinished business. The security guard reached for his weapon, but Victor was faster. A single shot dropped the man to the floor, wounded but alive. Ellie froze, calculating options with clinical precision, despite her terror. Your plan was clever, Victor acknowledged, using Ricci as bait. I expected such tactics from Marcus, but you surprised me. It's over, Victor, Ellie stated, steadier than she felt. The FBI is right behind me. You can't escape. Perhaps not, he conceded, but neither will you. A final message to Marcus about the cost of betrayal. As Victor raised his weapon, time seemed to slow. Ellie thought of Thomas, of Marcus, of the future they had begun to build together, of her father's watch on her wrist, the legacy of healing she'd sworn to uphold. Then movement behind Victor, a shadow resolving into a familiar form. Marcus' weapon raised, eyes cold with deadly purpose. Drop it, Victor, he commanded, voice like ice. It's finished. Victor stiffened but didn't turn. Marcus, come to save your waitress personally. How romantic. Last chance, Marcus warned. Surrender to federal authorities. A bitter laugh escaped Victor. You know that's not how this ends between us. It can, Marcus countered. Prison instead of death. Your choice. Victor's finger tightened on the trigger, his intentions clear in the set of his shoulders. Marcus fired first, a single shot, precise and final. Victor crumpled, weapon clattering to the floor, threat ended permanently. Ellie stood, frozen, medical training, urging her toward the fallen man, even as logic told her intervention was futile. Marcus moved forward, securing Victor's weapon, checking for pulse with professional detachment. Ellie, he said softly, breaking her trance. Are you hurt? She shook her head, words beyond her capacity in that moment. Marcus crossed to her in 3 strides, arms enfolding her, solid and real and alive. She clutched at him, feeling his heartbeat against her cheek, tangible proof of survival. It's over, he murmured into her hair. Truly over now. FBI agents poured into the corridor, securing the scene, separating them for questioning. The next hours passed in a blur of statements, medical examinations, procedural details. Throughout, Ellie answered mechanically, professional mask firmly in place while her mind processed the night's events. Dawn was breaking when they finally returned to the mansion, where Thomas waited anxiously with Dominic. The boy flung himself at Ellie the moment she entered, arms tight around her waist. You're okay, he breathed, relief palpable. Both of you. We're okay, she confirmed, smoothing his hair. And we're safe now, truly safe. Over his head, her eyes met Marcus's, exhausted, relieved, changed by the night's events. The conversation they needed to have would wait. For now, being home, being together was enough. 1 year later, the Salvatore Lake House in Vermont sparkled in summer sunshine. Renovations had transformed the property from neglected reminder of loss to vibrant family retreat. Thomas, now 15, raced across the lawn toward the dock, medical monitoring devices discreetly incorporated into his smartwatch and phone. Dad, Ellie, hurry up, he called impatiently. The boat's already out there. Marcus emerged from the house carrying a picnic basket, Ellie beside him, with a medical bag, habit rather than necessity these days. The gold band on her left hand caught the sunlight, still new enough to draw her gaze occasionally in wonder. Patience was never his strong suit, Marcus observed dryly, like his father. Ellie smiled, linking her arm through his. I find certain Salvatore men worth the wait. The past year had brought profound changes. Victor's death closed a painful chapter, allowing them to step fully into the future. Marcus had completed the transition to legitimate business, entirely focusing on real estate development and charitable foundations. The Salvatore Family Foundation, with Ellie on its medical advisory board, now funded scholarships for aspiring healthcare professionals from disadvantaged backgrounds. Ellie herself had accelerated through her medical program, now halfway to her degree, combining studies with her role in Thomas's care and the foundation's work. The balance sheet insisted upon independence alongside connection had proven sustainable, enriching rather than diminishing their relationship. Rose called this morning, Ellie mentioned as they walked toward the dock. She's enjoying her senior's cruise. Apparently she's caught the attention of a retired judge from Florida. Marcus chuckled. Your friend is formidable. Should I be concerned about this judge's intentions? Rose can handle herself, Ellie assured him, though she expects us to vet him thoroughly when they dock in Boston next month. Of course, Marcus agreed solemnly. Nothing but the best for family. The word wrapped around them comfortably, now their unconventional unit stronger for the challenges overcome. At the dock, Thomas waited impatiently. Captain's hat perched jauntily on his head, a birthday gift from Rose. Finally, he groaned. I thought I'd grow old waiting for you too. Respect your elders, Marcus admonished lightly, stepping into the boat with practiced ease. Especially those carrying your lunch. Thomas rolled his eyes, but the affection between father and son was palpable. As Ellie joined them, medical bags stowed securely, she touched her father's watch on her wrist, a habit now connecting past to present. Ready for adventure? Marcus asked her quietly, hand covering at hers. Ellie gazed at her unlikely family, the boy found in snow, the man whose world had expanded to include her, the future stretching bright before them. Always, she replied, and meant it with her whole heart. The boat pulled away from the dock, carrying them across sparkling water toward new horizons together.